Payal Kataria Madam ji. First of all, I thanks Payal Madam for accepting our invitation in very short notice. I can say it was just a 2 hours and she just told us I am ready to take the webinar. Prior to that, the speaker was CA Avinash Poddar but due to some medical emergency, he was not able to attend the same. So I thank you, Payal ma'am, for the today's session and I welcome you. Before starting the webinar, in finance bill, there are not much changes on GST because everything always it is covered by the notifications. So there is no need actually. Sometime I think that it is not required because notifications are so much that it on and off there are the changes. But still, to conclude it, I request CA Anisha ma'am to kindly give the introduction for the today's speaker.
Thank you, Amish, for giving this opportunity. And firstly, on behalf of Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle, I convey a heartfelt thank you to our respected speaker, CS Payal Kataria, for accepting our invitation at such a short notice. Thank you so much. CS Payal Kataria is a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretary of India with post-graduation in Commerce, having 10 years experience as practicing Company Secretary in Delhi. She provides advisory services to organizations on goods and service tax and also advises industry in adopting digital technologies in operations, use analytics for visibility and decision making. She contributed in her capacity as special invitee of GST Core Committee of ICSI in the year 2017 and 2018. Presently member of Advanced Tax Laws Experts Committee of ICSI and Young Members Empowerment and Placement Committee of NIRC of ICSI for the year 2020-21. She has been nominated as member of GST Cell of the Institute of Cost Accountant of India for the year 2020-21. She is playing instrumental role in building awareness on GST. With this brief introduction, I request Payalji to begin the session on analysis of indirect tax proposals in Finance 2021. Over to you, Payalji. Thank you.
Thank you, C. Anisha ma'am. And also thanks to the chairman of Study Circle meeting for inviting me to this webinar on indirect taxation analysis of budget. Of course, not much on GST because the finance minister, she didn't spend much time on the GST. And I was remembering the days when we were listening to we were listening to the budget. And in the budget speech, all the consumers are basically focusing on the rates, especially of the refrigerators, cars, motorcycles, etc. That what will be the rates and all. Because the budget is focusing more on the budgets of the consumers. But now the GST is in the hands of the GST Council, and whatever are rates they are decided that they are decided through the GST Council. So I would say that now this GST budget is actually the budget for the professionals, because this time I think the finance minister, she has really put an impact on the budgets of the professionals by touching section 35 subsection 5. And secondly, I would say that it is a budget for the like the taxpayers here, because it's impacting more and more whatever provisions they were taken under the budget through the amendment in the CGST Act and the IGST Act. So our main focus on the budget is not with respect to the rates and all with respect to the GST. The main focus now is totally on what changes are there through the amendment in the CGST Act and the IGST Act. So that's why I think it's impacting the professionals, it's impacting the taxpayer, or we can say the intermediary. Reason being, the GST is basically the tax on the consumers. And the taxpayer who is registered under a GST, he is only the intermediator who is actually collecting the taxes on behalf of the recipients and depositing that taxes into the government exchequer. He is only the intermediator. So how this budget is impacting this intermediator, like the suppliers and the professionals who are actually working or who are actually facilitating the success of the GST. So from that point of view, we have to understand what respective changes has been done in the CGST Act and the IGST Act. So first, let's discuss the Section 7 amendments, the proposed amendments. And the first amendment with respect to the Section 7, here they have introduced a subclause AA in Section 7, subsection 1. And through this subclause, now they have actually widened the ambit of the supply. So every time in the initial time, everyone was saying that okay, this supply is actually not defined in Section 2. So we always feel that why it's not defined in Sections 2 and why it's particularly defined under the Section 7, and that too with the open hands and with the world, etc. And so the scope is very wide in Section 7. Every time you can never think what is actually added under the ambit of the supply. And to again widen the scope of the supply through this amendment, one another addition has been done. Now, what government has done through this proposed amendment, that any transaction, for example, there is a one club, any transaction between or the services which is provided by the club to its members, now they are under the ambit of the supply. And what we are feeling here, that now through this amendment, actually government has done something against the Supreme Court judgment, and that judgment is with respect to the your Calcutta Club Limited judgment given by the Supreme Court. So here actually on the basis of the concept of the mutuality, the Supreme Court said that the services cannot be provided to the self. So that's why the Supreme Court said that this is not under the ambit of the supply. But through this amendment, actually the government is saying now that this transaction is now falling under your supply section. So this is about the first amendment, proposed amendment. And now the second proposed amendment is with respect to your Section 16, subsection 2. Again here, the subclause AA has been introduced. So I remember the day when our late finance minister, Mr. Jaitley, he used to give the statement at the inception of the GST. He every time used to say that GST has a seamless flow of the credit. I think many times, whatever experience we have during this last 3.5 years with respect to the GST, we have seen that people misinterpreted actually his statement, and sometimes they take the credits blindly, you can say, without seeing. And that's why government also faced certain problems with respect to this, or many fraudulent people took actually the advantage of this clause. So all due to these people, government keep on making the changes, and due to these changes, basically the honest taxpayer is suffering. Okay, let's find out that what actually the amendment has been proposed under this Section 16, subsection 2, under the subclause AA. So here what government says, their intent here is to like restrict your input tax credits. So what they are saying under AA, the details of the invoice or the debit notes which are referred to in your clause A, they has been furnished by the supplier in the statement of your output supplies, and such details they have been communicated to the recipient of the such invoices or the debit notes in the manner as specified in Section 37. So 2 points we must recognize here or highlight here. One thing is that your supplier actually has filed your GSTR1 if you want to claim the input tax credit. Now secondly, the word communicated is used basically in this subclause AA. So now let's interpret the word communicated to the recipient. Now what government want to say is that through what mode the communication will happen. that the that it is communicated to the recipient that he has filed the GSTR1. So actually government is every time introducing so many points here. First time they said that know your suppliers. They introduced this concept. Later on, we find that this facility, which is provided under the on the GST portal very recently, with respect to the communication with the other GSTN person. So when government introduced this facility of communication with the another GSTN holder, then I was thinking that what is the legal backing of this facility? Okay, I can communicate it through another channel. Okay, it's fine. Through the GST portal, you are giving me one facility to communicate with another GSTN holder. So what's the objective and what is actually the intent and what is actually the legal backing here? So now I'm actually correlating that facility which is provided very recently with this communication. So there might be the possibility that in future government may say that the facility which is actually provided on the portal very recently with respect to the communication, now this communication they may ask the supplier to communicate through the portal. So it means on the one side, you are propagating that you want to reduce the compliances, but on the same time, through recently through the QRMP scheme, they are propagating that it is for the ease of doing business. It is just to reduce the compliance cost, or to you can say that to reduce the compliances overall. But on the another side, if this type of mechanism is imposed on us, on the taxpayers, like the communication channel which I have to do, so whether I should do my business or I should communicate through the portal, and every time I keep on saying that, okay, I have filed the return. Or so it means these two things are actually putting indirectly the burden. Although legal burden of filing the GSTR reduced through the QRMP scheme, etc., which government proposed recently for the for the taxpayers having the aggregate turnover below the 5 crores. But on the same hand, such type of facilities or such type of changes are actually putting a burden on the taxpayers. So this is the change because it seems that now government wants that the input tax credit should be availed only and only if the GSTR1 is actually filed by the your supplier, and at the same time it is communicated to the recipient. Only then the recipient will claim your input tax credits. So sometimes you feel that this is also against actually the intent of the law if you are basically restricting the input tax credits. Okay, now the another amendment, that is with respect to your section 35 subsection 5. So here what government is saying that now they have omitted your section 35 subsection 5, and what is the outcome here? Now the outcome is that the GST audit which is done by the chartered accountants and the CMA, now it is not it is omitted. It means now it is not required after making the amendments in this section when it will be imposed or it will be implemented. So sometimes and at the same time what they are saying, now at the one time they have omitted the GST audit, and what is the base which is put before in order to omit this section? They were saying that GST audit extension was claimed 7 times. So this is the data which is provided through the GST Council's minutes of meeting. So here they are saying that 7 times it was extended, and secondly they are saying that it is actually the burden, financial burden on the taxpayer, because they are saying that the professional charge a huge fees for the GST audit from the taxpayer, and it is putting a burden on the taxpayer. And just to take care of the taxpayers, now they have actually abolished, they have omitted the section 35 subsection 5. But At the same time, they have made the change in section 44 of this annual return, in which they are saying that it doesn't mean that there will not be the filing of your reconciliation statement. The work will be here, but only the audit which is to be signed by the professional, only that part is actually omitted. But now the same reconciliation is to be self-certified by the taxpayer. So it means the work is to be done, and of course, this work the taxpayer cannot do. Reason being, everyone knows that this is not the simple tax. Now, day by day, the GST is becoming more complicated. So, of course, client will not do the GST audit, or he will do the reconciliation himself or herself. But of course, this will be done by any professional. But the certification which is to be done by the professional no more is required. Now let's see what will be the consequence now due to this change. The government and the whole industry will suffer. Of course, when industry will suffer, because the what we can visualize from this change, that there are more chances of the litigation. So if on the one side you are saving the professional fees, on the another of the taxpayers, but at the same time, if there is the increase in the litigation, then of course this is a more burden, and there is a more mental burden in fact. So if you are doing a GST audit, then of course you are paying for it. It is a cost to you. But if you are under the litigation for certain matter, so along with your cost of the litigation, there is a mental burden as well as. So it means there is a no mental burden, of course, in case of the audits if you are getting it done through the professional CA and CMA. But the burden of cost as well as the mental burden, which is the most important thing, which should not be actually ignored by the department, that even these days we are also finding that many mistakes due to the changes, frequent changes by the government through the various notifications, and people due to the unawareness about these changes. Now government is giving so many notices, they are showering so many notices with the show cause notices with respect to section 73, 74. It's 74, it's fine, but what about section 73, when they are putting a section 61 under this template? There is a scrutiny of matters. And one more point, when I was discussing with one learned official, so he also mentioned that they already have a GST, they have a audits under section 65, which is to be done by the department. They have also the mechanism of the audit under section 66, where the department authorized certain professionals like the CA and CMA to do the audit for the department. So they are saying that if in the chain these type of audits they are also available, then let's remove the burden of this GST audit through section 35 subsection 5. So now let's see, because government is working on the experiences when the GST came into picture, but now they are running on the basis of experience. Whatever experience they gain, if they gain that, okay, more people are doing the frauds, more night buy operators are there, then what they do, they keep on changing, they keep on making amendments just to protect their revenue. And sometimes like honest taxpayers, they suffer. So here I would quote the one proverb here, like गेहूं के साथ घुन भी पिस जाती है. So it's like that only, like if you are making certain changes, so here the honest actually suffer due to those. Also the government keep on saying that it's not their intent actually to harass or to put impact on the honest taxpayer, but ultimately we have seen, or we have also experienced, that our honest or genuine taxpayers, they are also suffering due to certain notifications which came into picture, all due to control the basically the wrongdoers. So let's see what government will experience by omitting section 35, and definitely I know that they will come up with some another provision where they are again will ask that okay, we need GST audit back. So let's wait, watch, and I know that with patience, the things will come up again. So this is about section 35. Now, with respect to section 50, section 50 talks about the interest on the delay payment of tax. Here, as you know, that there were hue and cry with respect to whether the interest will be applicable on the gross or it will be applicable on the net. So what the department or what the professionals were of the view, no, it should be on basically the net. But department were sending the notices that it should be on the gross liability. So ultimately, GST Council also came into picture. They also said that no, actually the intent is that it should be actually on the gross. It should not be, it should be on the net. So thereafter, they made the certain retrospective effects, and now through this, through the amendment in the act, which is proposed under the this budget itself, it has been now implemented. Now, with respect to section 74, the proposed amendment is here that where the notice under the same proceeding is issued to the main person which is liable to pay tax and some other person, and such proceeding against the main persons that have been concluded under section 73 or section 74, the proceeding against all the persons liable to pay under section 122 and 125, they are deemed to be concluded. So here, whatever proceedings they are under section 73 or 73(4) will now be, it means now there will be conclusion of the proceedings under section 122 and 125, but not under section 129 and 130. Then there are proposed amendments under section 75 subsection 12. This is with respect to the general provisions for the determination of the tax. Here what government is saying, now they have widened the scope actually of the self-assessed tax basically. What they are saying that whatever you are communicating through your GSTR1, that will be considered as your self-assessed tax, because sometimes what happens, you may communicate through your GSTR1. For example, you say that your tax liability is 1 lakh rupees, but actually the liability is 50,000, and the liability is less basically, but you file your GSTR1 correctly. If you're filing your GSTR 3B correctly or paying the tax correctly, but at the same time, actually the GSTR1 is filed wrong. So here actually they widened that bit of the GSTR1 here and the self-assessed tax, and now the proceedings can be initiated under this particular section. Now, section 83(1). This is with respect to the provisional attachments to protect the revenue in certain cases. So here the government has again widened the scope of the provisional attachments. What changes they have done here? Here they have widened the scope of the people whose property or whose bank accounts actually can be attached by the officer. So here it's not only the taxpayer, it's not only the registered person who is actually liable, but here they have put a burden on any person, because the word any person has been mentioned in your section 83(1). So what is the outcome of this? So the outcome is that now any person who actually causes, the word causes is also mentioned. So it means any person here, it can be the manager, it can be the auditor, it can be the legal advisor who is actually causing actually, or who is taking the benefit out of it. That person's personal property as well as the bank accounts can be attached by the officer. So because this is all due to the experiences, sometimes we see the provisions from everybody's point of view. Actually not, it is not from everybody's point of view. We have to see that what government has experienced in last 3.5 years. On the basis of that experience, actually these provisions are speaking. And many times I feel that yes, there is a provision of arrest. There are certain stringent provisions. But sometimes I feel that the people on whom actually the arrest provisions are applicable, they have no fear. They have no fear from it. But the people on whom actually the provisions of arrest, which is not applicable, sometimes they are afraid of it. Right. Because as I told you earlier as that कि गेहूं के साथ घुन भी पिस जाती है. Similarly, actually, they have to face the proceedings. Sometimes they have to face the questioning and all. That's why they are fearful. But those on whom these provisions and for whom actually these provisions they are drafted, they are still continuing or they are still practicing the wrong deeds. Now, so this is all about the provisional attachment. Now there are certain changes with respect to your section 107 subsection 6. So this section basically deals with the appeal to appellate authority. So here, what message government wants to communicate through this? Now they are saying that previously there, if you want to file an appeal under your section 129 subsection 3, then 10% was applicable. You have to pre-deposit the 10% of the penalty. But now they are saying that you have to deposit the 25% of the penalty before you initiate or you apply for your appeals under section 129(3). It means government wants that they want to make a strict creation of the e-way bills. They want that the supply or the movement of goods should be with tax, it should be with the invoices, and there should not be the evasion of taxes. The movement of goods should be with the with invoices and the taxes. So that's why now things are very strict, and on the basis of it, now it has penalty 25% amount has been placed now. So various changes actually has been proposed under section 129 and section 120, 130 basically. Again, the penalty from 100% to 200% has been proposed under section 129(1), and again section 129 subsection 2, it has been omitted. What it means that now government is saying that they will release the goods on the provisional basis upon the execution, that they will not release actually the goods on the bonds, etc. It means what government is doing now, that here you have to deposit the penalty by cash by cash. So what I am feeling here, because now the GST rates, they are not in the hand in budget. Whatever is promised in the part A by the finance minister, whatever schemes she launched through that, now that requires the money. From where now everyone is thinking that from where the money will come. So I think this is also one of the revenue model of the government. Now you will see that all these amendments, they are putting more stress on the penalty clauses. Now here the penalties has been increased. The government revenue is increasing, or government earning is basically increasing through your penalties. Like, because you can see that there are only 1.25 crore registered person, right? So here you have only few people. So every time you are pulling the ears of this these chunk of people actually, like from although I also remember the statement given by our late finance minister, Mr. Jaitley. So he gave a statement that through GST, actually, we want to widen the tax base. And you must remember that initially the GST registrations, they were distributed like anything. Whosoever used to apply without saying much things, only 3 days were given, and GST registrations, they were given. But now government have realized, and I think now their intent is to squeeze it, and that's why day by day now the GST registration has been cancelled on the various reasons by the government, and now they are tightening basically the uh, tax base. But this is not the solution, because the tax base must be there in the country, and that philosophy and that policy was actually the good to increase the tax base. But by reducing, but government has experienced that by increasing the tax base, more fraudulent people, they are actually entering into the picture, and just due to those fraudulent people, these type of the stringent and the strict actions they are initiated. So these are the few changes, like with respect to section 129. Uh, Later on, so it means no bonds allowed, and you have to pay the penalty. Only then you can get your goods released. I also remember the time of the GST inception. Before the GST introduction, it's not only the state governments who were against it. And just to give the solution, the finance minister proposed the Compensation Act to satisfy them. And at the same time, you must remember that there was one protest by the CBIC officials also. They were also against the GST. Because why? Because when they see that, when they read, okay, this is the GST, so they found that their powers, they are reduced. They did not find their powers in the GST. That's why they also protest against the GST. But very soon, actually, the government shut them. They satisfy them, and I think that thing was not came up more. And later on, you must have seen that at the initial time, powers were less, but gradually now you are feeling that more and more powers they are given to the officials, to the commissioners through the various notifications. Now, under section 151 also, now the power to collect the statistics or power to seek the information from any person is given actually to the commissioner. Now, every time in all the amendments, now you will find that powers they are given to the commissioners. So this here also, the power is given to the commissioner under section 150, and your second section 151 also. And even one more power is given to the commissioner under section 44 also, that if the commissioner find that certain people, they do not require actually to file the GST annual return, even then the commissioner has a power that, okay, there is no requirement particularly to this segment of people to file actually the annual return. This power has also been added through your section 168 subsection 2. So now let's move to the IGST Act, that what amendments has been proposed under IGST Act. Here under section 16, the change has been done. Here they have added the word in section 16, subsection 1, subclause B. As you know that section 16 talks about the zero rated supply, and under the zero rated supply, there are two people, like one is your export and another is the supplies to the SEZ. So both this SEZ and your exporters, they are considered as a zero rated. But as you know that there was a hue and cry, there is a misunderstanding, there was so many ambiguities to understand this SEZ. Here now government has clearly added the word for authorized operations to the special economic zones. So as you know that under the SEZ Act, only the authorized operations, they are considered as the exports. So that's why now government has added this word to make a more clarity here. So this is the objective to introduce this word. And second main change which is done here with respect to section 16.3, here now actually it seems that now government wants to restrict, or government is not having actually the intent basically to give the input tax credits. Here what government is saying, like if you want to export, as these are zero rated, so one mode which is available to you, that is the export with the payment of goods, with the payment of taxes, and another mode which is available, that is the without payment of tax, and that mode is called your when you do it through the bond and your LUD. These are the two ways. And when you are opting the first method, like if you pay the tax and just you take the refunds with the payment of tax, now what here government is saying, if you want to export, what you will do, you cannot opt this with payment of taxes. Now they are forcing you basically to export without payment of tax and use your LUD and the bond, which is the another option. Now, what loss actually the exporter will suffer? Because once you are claiming the first option, then what advantage you will get? You will get all the input credits, like whether it's on goods, your services, your capital goods as well. But in the second mode, if they are asking us to opt the second mode only, then what will be the consequence here? The consequence is that I have to sacrifice my input, which is on the capital goods, and my capital goods input, it will get accumulated. So that is the loss. But here again, and what is the intent of introducing this clause? Reason being, the government again experienced that people, fraudulent people, basically they are showing the things through exports, and they are actually claiming the huge refunds. And just to stop these people, now government has introduced this, but again the honest taxpayer will suffer due to the amendment in this section. But here simultaneously, because government knows that they have a very big exporters who will not die just this point, they will not agree with this. So at the same time, they have said that this provision will not be applicable to certain specified goods, to certain specified taxpayers. It means they know that whom they have to protect. It means the small one will basically suffer, because of course they have to take care of the big ones. But ultimately, here I want to share with you one very interesting data. You know, there are 1.25 crore taxpayers who are registered maybe as on today. So approximately these people are here under the GST ambit. And out of these total 100%, there are only 6% GST registered person, from whom approximately 65% revenue is coming. And out of this total 100, 80% they are the proprietors. And these 80% proprietors, they are just giving the 13% of the total revenue of the GST. So it means government never ever wants to give trouble to this small segment, which is only the 6%, which is the main segment from whom actually government is generating the revenue. And that's why simultaneously they keep on protecting them. But these 80% tax base is basically suffering, because government knows that they are not getting the much revenue from these. And when the fraudulent people enter in this tax base, they are doing so many wrong deeds, and due to these problems, basically the government is making certain amendments under the GST. So this is the small points which are actually introduced through through the budget, which I have shared with you. I hope you really find these useful. And if you have any question, as we have now only 5 minutes left, So if you have any question, then you can ask me.
Request member, if any question or queries, they can post on the chat box.
Just a question, I not written in the chat box. Is the amendment that they are bringing in the audit, constitutional validity would be there for GST audit, which they are proposing to remove?
Yes, of course, constitutionally, through constitution, it cannot be challenged basically, because constitution does not say that it is to be audited by the professionals, and on constitutionally it will not cannot be challenged. But of course, the burnt now government will suffer, and now the industry will say that they are now suffering the litigation cost. Then definitely, then government has to come back, or there might be possibility that government may come up with certain more better concept.
Madam, one more query is there from
So I think
CA
we
Punit
should
Gupta.
not worry on this point that government has snatched it. No, government has not snatched this from us. Work is still here, and definitely the professional will do that. And I hope that they will come up with certain better thing where they will realize that there is a need of professional certification.
Second query is that in the IGST amendment, what exporters are exempted, has that been clarified?
So they will notify actually. So whosoever will be exempt through that notification, they will notify that. In the budget, they have not said basically, but definitely through notification, that segment, that goods, they will come up.
Second thing, as per the amendment, it is mandatory to go for export without paying taxes.
Yes, if the taxpayer is not falling under that notified goods and the notified taxpayer, then definitely it is a mandatory clause, and they have to sacrifice the credits basically of the capital goods. And I think this point is actually against the intent of the GST, which is actually proposed through this IGST. Because the main objective behind this is that the many people are fraudulently showing that it is export, and just to put a hammer on those, this stringent provision has been introduced, and who is facing the burnt of it? I think the honest and the small taxpayer will suffer, because definitely the big will get it done through the notification. Big will never suffer. They know how to get the things done.
Next question is GST audit effective from which date? Which year?
What?
GST audit removal effective from which year?
Actually, this is proposed under the Finance Bill 21. So once it is passed by the Rajya Sabha and both the and the Lok Sabha both, then President assent will be here, then it will be implemented, then of course. But here the point is that because SGST is also involved here, so it means all the states will have to make the changes in their respective laws, then definitely it will be implemented. So let's see what comment will say for this 21.
Fine, ma'am. I think so. All the queries you had answered. No other is left. So on behalf of Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle, I give the hearty vote of thanks, and thanks for accepting our invitation in a short notice. Thanks. Now we had our the second speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. On a very short notice, you have accepted our invitation. Thanks, ma'am. Once again.
Thank you.
We have with our next speaker, CA Vikas Sethi sir. 1 minute.
He is not a CA actually.
No, it's not a CA. He will be taking on impact of union budget in capital market. So I request CA Aditya Maheshwari to kindly give the short introduction.
Yeah. Before the introduction, the speaker has requested that maximum participant could start their video. So it will be highly lively. It will be a more lively session, it seems. So Vikas Sethi is the managing director of Sethi Finmart Private Limited, a reputed stockbroking company having membership of NSE, MCX, MSCX, and CDSL. He is a well-known force for the Indian capital market, and after having completed his MBA in finance from the University of Mumbai, he went to the prestigious London School of Business School and got a master degree in the finance. He has more than 25 years experience of trading, investing in the Indian capital markets. His views and analysis on the Indian market is general and specific is particular. Keep appearing regularly on various national business news channels like Zee Business, CNBC, Awaaz, ET Now, Bloomberg, etc. He is widely respected and followed by general investors for his unbiased and expert advice on investment in Indian equities. He is also associated with several social charitable organizations like Lion Club of Yogi Nagar, Mumbai, Khandelwal, Digambar, Jain, Sabha, Mumbai, etc. He is also the founder, chief patron member of the JITO, Jain International Trade Organization. With this brief introduction, I request everyone to welcome him. Sir, over to you.
Good evening, Aditya. First, am I audible clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, and at the outset,
Yes, sir.
at the outset, I would like to thank Radheshyamji Falod, Aditya Falod, then Ameshji Sangoi, Deepakji Madlecha for having given me this opportunity to interact with you today on my views regarding the impact of the budget on the capital markets. It is my sincere request to all the participants to start their videos, because then only it would look as if I'm talking to a crowd and not talking to myself. Unless I see people listening to me, it would feel as if I'm talking to myself. So it's my sincere request, and when you have queries, you will have to necessarily switch on the video. Otherwise, I'm not going to answer your queries if you're not live on videos. Just on a jovial note. So basically, today what I'm going to do is talk about the impact of the capital markets, impact of this budget on capital markets. Actually, I was with you all during the last budget also, before the pandemic hit us. That was the budget of 2020. I think that was at the Raheja Classic Club. So I share good memories, and the stocks which I had identified then and had recommended then had done exceedingly well over the last 1 year. And I'm sure most of the participants would be comfortable in Hindi also. So I would like to use both the languages, or if you want, I can be fully into Hindi if it's okay with you all, because that way I would be able to express myself better than I can do in English.
So whatever is convenient to you, it's okay, sir.
Okay. So Aditya, I would request you or the host to allow me to share screen.
Yeah, it will allow.
No, have you allowed me to?
Yeah, you're the co-host. You can share the screen.
Just a sec.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, then. So let's now get going. So I would be very brief in as far as our the announcements were made in the budget, which clearly impact our capital markets. So I'll just rush through the major announcements, and then we can talk about some practical things. Like, I would basically like to harp upon the fact that the markets have given thumbs up to this kind of a budget, which people think nothing was done in the budget, but still the markets have gone up so high, meaning it has been an unprecedented rally ever since the budget. On the budget day, the Nifty went up by around 650 points and the Sensex went up by around 2,300 points. And post the budget also, over the last 1 week, we've already gone up on Nifty by around 1,000 to 1,200 points. And I've not seen this kind of a rally after the budget in my career of, say, the last 25 years. So we'll need to analyze what has gone so well that the markets are so buoyant. That I'll come to at the end of my talk. So as far as the proposals are concerned, let's take them one by one. I'm not able to move. Why is it? So just a sec. Okay. Yeah. Firstly,
You can start screen sharing, screen.
yeah,
slide
it's
view.
one.
Slide view actually.
Yeah, it's right now. Now it's okay. No, we've come to.
We can see.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as the major announcements were concerned, let us first run through them. Firstly, the finance minister talked about fiscal deficit for FY21 to be at 9.5%. This was really a big surprise. Normally in India, we look for a fiscal deficit figure of between 3 to 3.5%, or at the most it would be acceptable until 4%, but we had talked about 9.5% for FY21 and 6.8% for FY22, which was again on a very higher side, because we were expecting it to be close to around 5.5%. But despite this, our markets have behaved the way they have. Had it come in some other scenario, we would have been on a lower circuit actually. I'll come to it later on. Then the focus of the budget was mainly on employment generating sectors. The finance minister talked about impetus to construction, infrastructure, health, etc. Then there was a talk about increasing the capital expenditure. So a lot of things were done to boost capex, and they've announced it to be hiked to 2.5% of GDP in FY22. So clearly there was a focus on capex, and in the last budget also they'd announced a tax cut, to corporate tax cut for new projects to 15%, which is one of the most competitive tax rates across the world. So, and plus they've been talking about Atmanirbhar, and they'd done some, they'd announced that PLI incentive scheme. So which were all to boost capex or to boost spending on creating manufacturing facilities and all. Then the finance minister also talked about a massive divestment target of 1.75 lakh crores for FY22, which was only 32,000 crores in FY21. So that is an aggressive target. Then she talked about 35,000 crores to be allocated for COVID-19 vaccine. Then under the PM Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana, she talked about an outlay of 65,000 crores over the next 6 years. Then she announced a hike in FDI limit in the insurance sector from 49% to 74%, which would go a long way to improve the which would be pretty positive for the insurance sector as a whole. Then she announced that the government would come out with the IPO of LIC in FY22. Then infrastructure spend, she clearly laid focus on. So she announced, higher allocation for infrastructure spend. Then for affordable housing, the tax exemption limit was also extended until 31st of March 2022, which is a big positive for affordable housing segment. Then the finance minister also talked about privatization of 2 public sector banks and 1 general insurance company in FY22. Then for the power sector also, outlay of around 3.05 lakh crores over the next 5 years was announced. Then she made a big bang announcement on a bad bank, meaning an asset reconstruction company for bank NPAs. So that was a big positive. Then she announced that they would come out with the guidelines for the scrappage policy, which would be pretty positive for the automobile and the auto component sector. And this scrappage policy guidelines are due to come in the next 15 days. That is what I'm made to understand as far as the statement of Mr. Nitin Gadkari goes. Then they'd also announced that dividends to InvITs or REITs would be exempt from TDS. So these are the few announcements which the finance minister made and which have a direct bearing on the capital markets. And now I'll move to the impact of these announcements on various sectors. Let me first run you through them. As far as banking and financial services are concerned, she had made an announcement of recapitalization of around 20,000 crores for the public sector banks. Then privatization of 2 public sector banks and the general insurance company, FDI limit and insurance to be hiked, which I was already talking about. Then setting up an ARC for bank NPAs and setting up a development finance institution with a capital of 20,000 crores for infrastructure financing. This would be pretty positive for the banking and the financial services sector, and that is what we have seen in the past few days. The way the markets have given thumbs up to banks. Look at public sector banking stocks; they've all run through the roof. And look at the stock of State Bank of India, which was quoting at 290 rupees only prior to the budget, and yesterday it closed at somewhere close to 395 and went to a high of 410. Although there was a lot of built up because of the very strong numbers which State Bank of India announced yesterday. But even otherwise, all other public sector banking stocks did well. Private sector banks also did well, and there was some interest in NBFCs also. Then as far as infrastructure sector is concerned, the infrastructure outlay allocation was increased to 5.54 lakh crores. Then they had talked about spending heavily on roads, highways, railways, and ports. So which would all be pretty positive for the infrastructure sector as a whole. And from there, one could look at several stocks, which if you want, I can tell at the end of the session. Then power and renewable energy was also a sector which certainly the government laid emphasis on. They had announced a 3.06 lakh crore assistance package for distribution companies over the next 5 years, which would be pretty positive for the power producers when the health of the DISCOMs would get improved. So they'll be pretty positive for the power companies. And then clearly there was a focus on renewable energy that reduced or increased custom duty on imported solar inverters from 5% to 20%. So that would be helpful for our domestic companies which are into this manufacturing of solar inverters. Then as far as oil and gas sector is concerned, the most important thing is the divestment of BPCL, which is on its way. And I'm sure when they talk about 1.75 lakh crores divestment in FY22, it cannot happen without them being able to divest BPCL. Because a major chunk would come from that. And then they talked about increasing the presence of city gas distribution network or expanding it to 100 more districts. So that'll be pretty positive for companies like, say, an IGL or an MGL or an Adani Total Gas or GAIL, which is laying pipelines also. So these are the kind of things which the finance minister, the only very small negative was the agricultural infrastructure and development cess of rupees 2.5 and rupees 4 per liter on petrol and diesel. The next sector was housing and agriculture, which certainly was given a boost. That announced the tax exemption limit date being extended for affordable housing to 31st March 2022. Then under the Prime Minister Awas Yojana, the allocation was increased. And for the agriculture sector, they'd facilitated the credit being given to the agricultural sector. And further, there were some more announcements as far as the allocation to agriculture sector was concerned. So in a way, it was positive for housing and agriculture too. Then as far as automotive and auto component sector was concerned, the biggest thing which markets were looking for was the scrappage policy. So they had said, or she had said that in the next 15 days, the guidelines for the scrappage policy would be announced. Then they'd reduced import duty on steel, which would be limiting the increase in steel prices which we are witnessing, and that would be positive for automobile company. Then they have removed some anti-dumping duty also on steel, so which is positive for auto companies, because if the cost of steel comes down, then certainly their cost of production would come down. Then import duty on specific components also was hiked, and that would be positive for auto component companies. As far as healthcare is concerned, okay, the major announcement was the provision of 35,000 crores for COVID-19 vaccines, and some allocation was increased for healthcare and well-being. So clearly they laid focus on healthcare. And as far as metal sector was concerned, the increase in capital expenditure to 5.54 lakh crores or increase in infrastructure spend would be pretty positive for sectors like steel and cement. So that is how it would be positive for them. Baki, an anti-dumping duty was removed from steel, so which would lead to some competition, but then with the kind of demand which is being witnessed in the steel sector and the prices at their, say, multi-year highs, I don't think that's a cause for concern. So again, positive for metal sector as a whole. Finally, I think defense. Defense, again, it's a clear area of focus as far as this government goes with their announcements of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, and the capital expenditure for defense was increased, and they announced some tax incentives for to promote domestic aircraft leasing market. So these are the kind of announcements which they've made, and these are the kind of sectors which would be positively impacted by this budget. So now that's, and okay, finally, telecom. Telecom, again, under the BharatNet project, they have announced expansion of the optical fiber network to Gram Panchayats, then allocation of 5,200 crores for setting up optical fiber-based network for defense services. So this would be positive for companies which are into manufacture of optical fiber cables. And some of the companies whose name comes to my mind would be Sterlite Technologies or a Phenolix Cables or a KEI Industries or a Polycab. I think whether they would be into these kind of cables. So these are the kind of companies which would get benefited from the announcement as far as this optical fiber cable network is concerned. So, okay, this was what some of the announcements or the most of the announcement which impact capital markets was concerned. So now that is briefly the formal thing which was there in the budget, which I discussed. Now what I would like to harp on, or what I'm sure most of the participants would be interested in knowing is, if you look at the budget, there was nothing much which was done, but still we have seen a spectacular rally in our markets. And in my opinion, there are some 4 or 5 reasons for that. The first reason was that we were all expecting this budget to be harsh on us because of the finances of the government. Like we had already seen that they'd announced stimulus packages, and for the first 4 or 5 months of the lockdown, the revenues were very adversely impacted. So we were all under the impression that they would certainly impose some COVID cess, or they, since they feel that the stock markets have done well, so why not penalize them? Why not punish them by imposing some hike in long-term capital gains tax or short-term tax? So markets were pretty much sure that something of that sort would come, but nothing of that sort came. So no bad news was the biggest positive of this budget. And this was what was given a thumbs up by the market. And we saw the markets going up by 650 points. As soon as she finished talking about the direct tax or indirect tax proposal, the markets just rocketed because nothing negative was there. So the first important reason why the markets have done so well, or the markets had gone up or are so buoyant, is that there was no bad news in the budget. Second thing was, unlike earlier years when we were comfortable with a fiscal deficit of 3 to 4%, she was very bold this time and in announcing that we would have a fiscal deficit of 9.5% in FY21. Actually, in my opinion, she could have managed with 7.5%, but she front-loaded a lot of expenditure. Like if you would have noticed, post the budget, the expenditure secretary said that the fertilizer subsidy, which is of the amount of around 65,000 crores, would be paid to fertilizer companies before 31st March. So they front-loaded lots of expenses and made this fiscal deficit to 9.5%. It's like कि जब खराब करना ही है तो पूरा ही एक बार में करो. Let us see what the rating agencies do. Because normally what happens is जब भी भारत का जब ये fiscal deficit का number exceeds 4%, तो Fitch हो चाहे Moody's हो, they will start downgrading India. Whereas if you look at a lot of countries in the Western world, in the European continent, their fiscal deficit would be much higher than us, and still they are given a rating which is much higher than us. So we just bit the bullet, and she announced that the fiscal deficit would be 9.5%. And not only this, she went on and to say that for FY22 also it will be 6.8%, and we would normalize only by 2025. Do whatever you can. We are not bothered. So that is what was liked by the market. This time she is clearly focused on growth without bothering much about fiscal deficit as other countries do. So that was also something which was positive and which was liked by the markets, and the markets gave a thumbs up. She's at least focused on growth this time. Third, she announced a lot of measures focusing on capex, or a lot of spending on capex, spending on infrastructure, housing, agriculture. Then she announced a big bang program of privatization of disinvestment of public sector undertaking, and the amount is 1.75 lakh crores, which I feel this year she would be pretty close to achieving this target, unlike earlier years, because the markets are buoyant, and they've also understood that it's better to keep the markets buoyant when you want to do such a big divestment. So that is again a positive which was liked by the market. And fourthly, why I feel the markets have gone up for consecutively for the last 5 days is because our corporate results have been very impressive. For the December quarter, look at any sector, look at IT, the results declared by Infosys, TCS, HCL Tech, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, or even second rung or mid-cap IT companies, they were all fantastic. So nothing to complain as far as results are concerned. Some other sectors which did well, banks, they did well. Private sector banks which have been doing well, they came out with very good numbers. ICICI Bank in particular did pretty well. And yesterday we saw, or on Friday we saw State Bank of India, which was, I think, the best results in the last decade, which State Bank of India has declared. And it's taken all by surprise. Look at their improvement in the asset quality and all. And so most of the results from banking sector, and particularly PSU banks, you look at the results of Bank of Baroda, Canara Bank, they were also very good. And so that is also one of the reasons why this rally is not stopping. Then look at the metal sector results. You look at steel results like JSW Steel, JSPL, or Steel Authority of India Limited, or Vedanta. They all came with pretty impressive numbers. And Tata Steel is due to report its numbers on Tuesday, and I'm expecting very solid set of numbers from Tata Steel. So one can certainly look at Tata Steel on Monday also, although it went up yesterday also. Then cement again was a very good sector, and look at the results declared by Ultratech, which was robust. Then even second-run cement companies like Ramco Cement, Sagar Cement, JK Lakshmi Cement, Orient Cement, they all did well. So cement as a sector did well. Then pharma also did well, Sun Pharma, and today when we are talking, Divi's Lab, which is one of my favorite stocks, and last year when I was talking to you, I had recommended Divi's Lab to be bought at 1600 odd levels. And today, look at Divi's Lab, it's quoting at 3800, and we still recommend this stock to be bought at these levels. I'm very confident that over the next 1 year, we could see levels of at least 4,500 or 5,000 on Divi's Lab. So that has been one of my favorite stocks. And in addition, since we were talking about Divi's Lab, I would also like to mention the name of one other stock which I had given to you the last time when I was with you all. That was IOL Chemicals, which was at 180, 190 that day. And it had gone up to 800 rupees over the course of 1 year. So these two stocks did tremendously well. And other sectors also like power, FMCG, textiles, they've all been doing well. So the fourth reason why we are witnessing such a kind of rally is the corporate results. They were exceedingly well, and that is what is being reflected in this rally. The fifth and most important point is the relentless buying by FIIs. The reason could be anything. There's a lot of liquidity internationally. Fed has announced a big stimulus earlier, then announced one more stimulus recently. So the FII money is flowing into India. On an average, they've been buying 3,000 to 5,000 crores every day. So there's nothing stopping against liquidity. So if that continues, this rally is not going to stop. And we would have seen the Nifty would have been at 17,000 and not 15,000 had our institutions not resorted to selling spree over the last 3 months. Whatever demand has come from FIIs, some of that has been supplied by DIIs. And that is the reason why we've only been able to cover 15,000. Otherwise, I do not think we would have stopped short of 16, 17,000 on the Nifty. So relentless buying by FIIs. And they've been right in a way, because we are talking about a GDP growth rate of 11.5% in FY22. That is the real growth rate of 11.5%. And if you add inflation of around 4.5%, then we are certain to grow at 16% nominal growth rate in FY22, which has been even said by an international agency like an IMF, and our government also thinks so. So when we are going to grow at this rate, then FIIs do not have any choice. They would need to be in India, they would need to invest in India, they would need to keep pouring in money into India. So that is also one reason why the markets are have done so well. And finally, the reason for this markets to have gone up so much is the FOMO factor, the fear of missing out. Most of us have been caught unaware. We have been left standing on the platform and seeing the trains pass by, and we have not been able to board into that train. This is what has happened with most of the people. So there is a huge feeling of being left out. And some smart investors, since prior to the budget, for the 5 days prior to the budget, we had seen a correction of 1,000 points on the Nifty, 5,000 points on the Sensex. People thought that for now it's done, and now we are headed for a correction, a big correction. So people had shorted, or if not shorted, they had liquidated their trading positions, because normally what happens is after every budget, or after most of the budgets, the markets crack. We do not sustain, because there is something or the other in the fine print of the budget which disappoints the market, and the markets correct. So when the markets were up 200 points on the Nifty prior to the budget speech, people had started shorting in view that once the budget speech is over, once she starts talking about direct and indirect taxes, there would be something and we would correct. So there were a lot of shorts in the system, and look at the way the market, and this is clearly evident because the rally which we saw on the budget day of 650 points on the Nifty and 2,300 points on the Sensex. And at the end of the day, if you look at the figures of the FIIs, they'd only bought around 1,500 crores. So where did the buying come from? There was no buying actually. There was very limited buying by FIIs, and DIIs had sold that day also. So it was more short covering which helped the markets go up that day, and that's continuing. So it's FIIs money and the short covering which is there, which has led to a massive gain of 11 to 1,200 points on the Nifty in a matter of just 5 days. So this is my view as far as the current market situation is concerned. And if you want to know what do I feel about the, say, the forthcoming days, or say in the next 3 to 6 months, where are we headed or what should we be doing? What I feel is, although since we are at 15,000 levels, which is not cheap, we should certainly be cautious. We should stick to quality, look at the companies where there is no issues of corporate governance and which are reasonably valued and not exorbitantly valued. And one should use a stock specific approach, and I'm sure there's money to be made. And if you have a view of at least a year, 2 years, then I don't think there's need to worry. Although I'm also of the opinion that these markets can correct 5 to 10% anytime. And if that happens, that would be a great opportunity to buy into this market. So keep making a list of good stocks, keep them on your radar, and keep buying into them when the market corrects. that is how I think one should go. There's no need to worry. We are not at euphoric or abnormal valuations. Our corporate results have been good. And this rally has been led by a rally in most of the sector and most of the stocks. It's not been a particular stock which has led to this rally. Someday pharmas do well, someday ITs do well, someday FMCGs do well, even cement and steel are taking part, banks are taking part. So it's a broad-based rally. Valuations are not exorbitant, but since we have run up pretty fast in a very short span of time, one needs to be cautious, and one can use a staggered approach to be buying into this market or wait for corrections. But normally these days corrections do not happen. They only happen for intraday, for half a day, and the market comes down and there's a lot of buying which starts and the markets again recover the entire losses. So that's how it goes. So Aditya, now whatever I had to say, I've already summed up. I think I've covered most of the things. And if some participants have any, if any participant has any queries, I will